My name's Angela, and I'm back with Peace and Justice. And today we're going to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. So, again, in 2015, the UN set up 17 resolutions known as Sustainable Development Goals with the aim of producing universal peace and prosperity by 2030. In this video series, we're focusing on two goals that we think are particularly important: peace and justice. We're looking at modern research and modern activists and comparing or exploring their teachings as it relates to ancient wisdom. And today, again, we're talking about MLK on the actual eve of his birthday. And this year's presentation takes on special significance. So I invited fellow instructor Siobhan Johnson to tell us a little bit more about MLK's philosophy. So hi, Siobhan, how you doing?
I am well, Angela. How are you doing?
Awesome. I'm doing good. So I know in our last video, we talked about Brené Brown's philosophy of cultivating inner peace in order to, or really sort of as an essential step to generating outer peace. And today we wanted to talk about MLK, and I know he's had such an impact on you in your life, and I wanted to ask you a couple questions we can sort of discuss, and hopefully people can follow along, all right?
Thank you. I think this is going to be a really enlightening, informative conversation, and I'm just happy to talk about Martin Luther King and his ideals and ideas that have really helped move humanity forward towards, as he would say, the promised land.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm super excited. Oh.
Yes.
All right, so we'll start. First question here. What inspires you most about MLK's work throughout his life, and how can we follow his example today?
What inspires me about Martin Luther King's work was that he was an ardent defender of the virtues, and that we need to love other people. But again, we have to love ourselves first and foremost. And we could talk about we want freedom and justice, and we want our citizens to be more courageous, to have more temperance and not to act out irrationally and follow the scientific method, et cetera, et cetera. We can want all of those things for the world. We can desire to live in a utopia. However, from him, I learned we really have to practice that on our own, in our own personal life, in our own life with our family and our friends. And we have to determine, what am I willing to live for? Even the question must be asked, what am I willing to die for? And as I listen to his speeches and watch news reports of what he was doing at the time, traveling from state to state, giving speeches at different churches, advocating for the rights of workers, this is a really, really important example on what we each can do. You know, we often compare ourselves to people. So as I thought about Martin Luther King in preparation for this talk, I started to realize, wow, I'm in my mid-30s and he accomplished so much at this age, and then he traveled to this state and gave this magnificent speech. And I fell into the trap of comparison, you know, and I would think his life, his example is not about comparing. It's not saying he did this, what have I done? It's he did this, what can I do? What can I do with the limited time I have? How can I best embody the virtues that he spoke about? Peace and justice. Do I recognize that in myself? Have I adhered to these principles? Have I lived them? Do I honor myself? Do I dignify myself by walking my path and not comparing myself to him or any other human being that is living currently or has lived? And a word comes to mind, Angela, when I think about his example and how he inspired me is that he was seeking unity. He was seeking the unity of the human being within their own self. Because he said to himself, most likely, I need to seek unity within me because I seek it within the country, the United States. It's not the divided states. So unity is a principle that I think really resonates with where I want to create a fortification within myself, because a unified front against injustice is how we're going to confront injustice in the world.
I did love what you said, though, about the virtues being the thing that, kind of can seek to unify all of us, because beyond whatever opinion might be out there, that if we're all striving for those virtues, those are things that can seek to bring us together as we move towards them. And so that unity is really a beautiful message there.
For me, when I get inspired, it's because of a warmth I feel within my chest, my heart. And that can happen when I listen to a piece of music, or listen to a speech, or go outside and look at the sunset or the sunrise, or even hear the rustling in the trees, or the rain hitting the roof on my apartment. And what inspires me about Martin Luther King is when I listen to his speeches, and not just the words he's saying, and not even how he's saying it, but that there's a vibration, a resonance, where I can't even explain it in any other way except there's a voice within me that says, yes, that's right. Capital R right, in the human sense. It makes me think, if human beings followed these words and understood them, we can march forward to a better place, not just externally, a better society, a better government, but a better individual. And listening to his words, I just saw the struggle of what he really was up against. And then I had to reflect on my life. What am I up against in my own life? He was dealing with what he was dealing with. I'm dealing with what I'm dealing with in my life. And then I have to look at the example of, if he could do it, so can I. He was in a unique situation where he brought it upon himself, Angela, to really spearhead this movement. And there was the threat of harm to himself and his family, but he kept moving forward. He was just constantly reflecting, am I doing the right thing? Am I standing up for the principles? Am I doing enough? And then again, what inspires me is I ask those questions to myself. Am I doing enough in the world? Am I leaving the world a better place than I found it? Now, I'm inspired by art and poetry, paintings, nature. The same thing happens when we look at a great painting by, for example, Leonardo da Vinci. Let's use the Mona Lisa. Human beings have been visiting that painting in the museum for decades, and they might have artistic aspirations. And they may say to themselves, well, what's the point of painting if I can't paint a Da Vinci? But that's a limiting belief. The same would be the case if we listened to a speech by Martin Luther King and said, well, the world is a mess. I'm not him. What can I do? And I've thought these questions, and the answer I keep coming back to is, I can do a lot. I can do a lot in my little patch of earth here. And so I would sum up then the answer, what really inspires me? Dedication, motivation, steadfastness, and the seeking of unity. Because as he noted, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And I really feel that this is something we all can live towards, seeing injustice in the world and correcting the wrongs, seeing the mistakes that we have made and then redeem ourselves and correct them. So that harmony of our inner world, how we see ourselves, how we see the world, and what changes we want to make in both, that is something I really found inspiring. The idea of unity within will allow for there to be unity without, unity external to me. And knowing that the work may not be done in my lifetime, that too, I should know, Angela, really inspired me. He mentioned this many times. And, you know, we have limited time here on our planet. And I just continuously ask myself, what can I do with the time I have? And seeing what he did with his time really inspired me.
It brings to mind the word hope, that he instilled this hope in people, that every person can have an impact in this way. And it reminds me actually of, in the last video, we talked about Brene Brown's philosophy, and she had an interesting thought on hope. Actually, I'll read it here. Hope is not an emotion. It's a way of thinking or a cognitive process. Emotions play a supporting role, but hope really is a thought process made up of what Schneider calls a trilogy of goals, pathways, and agency. So really what Martin Luther King did in this instilling of hope, it wasn't just, you know, this, oh, I have this hope and it just sort of is dissolving out there in the future. It's, no, I have these goals. I have an idea of what can make change, and I am going to dedicate myself to those goals and utilize my own agency, and also, you know, inspire others to make that choice to join me in those causes. And it was really a sort of, you know, very unified action on his part to say, I have hope for these goals and I want to attain them. And in doing so, and in those small steps, he really made a huge impact in his life, and that still echoes out to today. What's actually something that surprised you to learn about Martin Luther King's life?
One of the things that really surprised me was discovering that he got C's in public speaking. He got C's in public speaking. You know, this made me think of the following. When we see human beings that do great work, we're talking about Martin Luther King today, but it could be a great artist, as we've noted, a musician, a chef, any occupation, any human being that does something in the world that resonates with us, that we think might be cool or worthwhile to do on our time. That, to me, is really, really awesome. That it shows he was a human. He was a human being. He got C's in public speaking. And now his speeches are listened and watched by many, many human beings since then. So what does that say? We can always improve. We can always improve. And not to be judged by our last grade in a class or the last mistake we made. You know, we get stuck in the past. Oh, well, he got C's, so why would I listen to any other speech, any speech he made? I don't want to listen to a speech of a C student. Now, listening to his speeches and then knowing this fact, we could see that there's a disconnect. He obviously struggled, but he kept working at it. And I see this as a parallel, and I love to do the reflection. The lesson that we can learn from his life that can help us live our lives. Essentially, Angela, now you got me thinking of this word. where are we ignorant? And if we're ignorant, how can I educate myself, communicate with other human beings, learn from others to expand my view of the world, to connect with human beings that think differently than I do, and to realize that what connects all of us are these virtues that we were talking about, the sentiments that we feel as human beings. And, just thinking that he got C's in public speaking and now he has monuments and a holiday, it makes me think of the limiting beliefs that we put on ourselves, either because of a voice in our own minds or the voices of those around us saying we shouldn't, we couldn't, we can't. If they were in our shoes, they would do something different, right? All the voices we hear from people that would tell us, oh, I'm only looking out for you. I don't want to see you get hurt. But sometimes, Angela, sometimes we find ourselves on a path in life, a righteous cause, where there may be the threat of pain, of disappointment, of hurt. And embarking on that path, that journey, will help us find the tools within, the strengths to overcome. It would be absurd to think he could have done everything in his power in terms of helping human beings find dignity and rooting out injustice and seeking peace and equality, that he wouldn't come up against any barriers whatsoever. We know that's definitely not true. But again, just in our own lives, when we try to do those things for ourselves, find inner peace, be just, find inner harmony within our own selves, we're going to encounter barriers as well. Perhaps in the mental realms, circular thoughts, or as I noted, the words of our friends and family and people in our circle saying, why are you doing that? Seeking peace. You have a good job, you have a nice home. What more can you ask? What's more beyond the tangible that you need to be comfortable in this world? Well, I'll end this answer on this note. And this is something I learned from Martin Luther King, that we as human beings need to be in this world, but not of it. Because if he was of his world, there would have been no reason for him to fight for equality and peace and justice. There would be no reason to improve. There would be no reason to try to work on public speaking if he got C's. Everything is determined and baked into the cake. And what we see from his examples, that's not true. Anything could be made better if we infuse love within it and really take stock of what's essential. What do I want to see in the world? And how can I live that? How can I live that within first and foremost? So that is really something that surprised me about his life, him being a C student, but him not adhering to that story, that he was able to improve and be an example of what it means to improve oneself and try to do that in the world as well.
Just knowing that he had to work really hard to become good at public speaking. And not only that, he, suffered so many, he went to jail so many different times. He, put himself in these really sort of precarious situations, and his family, the incredible sacrifice that was required for him to do that. And the word sacrifice, actually in the ancient tradition, or would be equated with sacred offering. And so I imagine all of the times he took to actively work on himself as a speaker, or go to these places where he was needed to boycott or to organize a march. The sacrifice that was required to do that is incredible, but it made sacred the cause that he was fighting for, and it fed the virtue of it even more. And I think about, some people might shy away from doing maybe what they feel in their heart is right, or maybe even doubting that because, like you said, like maybe, oh, I'm not good at that, or oh, thinking of the fear of what might happen in order to take that step. But to know that when we sacrifice certain things, even if it's just that self-limiting belief, that we're making something, the thing that we are sacrificing for, sacred, and lifting it up to a place where we could inspire others, and that we know ourselves. It pulls us along to make us better by engaging in those things that we know could make a difference.
You made me think of something again. This is what happens when we talk about life and philosophy and human beings that have tried to change the world for the better. And one of the ideas that came to mind was the idea of sacrifice. And you said something really cool, that as he worked for the betterment of society, he made sacred that which he is trying to improve. In effect, right? It's really interesting. Thus, we can say, in a way, he behaved as if the world was sacred, that it needed to be tended to and nurtured and loved and loved. It's sort of like seeing yourself as part of a mosaic, and that we often think we're an island, that the problems in our lives are ours alone. But all over the world, human beings are going through trials and tribulations, and they're each sacrificing in their own right. And when we understand that our struggle is not our struggle alone, that my struggle is tied inextricably to the other human beings on this planet, it feels to me, when I think about this, it lightens the load. That life isn't as heavy because I'm working not just for myself to seek inner peace and harmony and to be just, to be good, but when I do it for others, a cause higher than myself, it's sort of like floating because you're not walking through the world with a heavy backpack. You're thinking, well, I'm going to work for others. I'm going to love people like I love myself. Every child that's hungry is like my child that's hungry. Every elderly human being in the world that may suffer from loneliness or sickness or disease is just like my grandparents, my parents, or me in the future. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. I'm glad you mentioned that. Sacrifice. What am I willing to give up? The ability to lounge around and chill and relax, or to use the time, the limited time I have, to work for a cause greater than myself.
And so with that, this concludes our video 2 of our Peace and Justice series. And tune in actually for the next video. We're hoping to explore more of these themes in depth.